You're with Clement Manyathela.
7:02.
Right, 13 minutes now after 10 o'clock. Let's continue with this global news story. Is Iran going to retaliate following an attack on its nuclear facilities by America? I promised you a conversation with someone in Iran, someone in Israel, and someone in Turkey. So we stay on that region as we find out what is the next potential moves. I want to start with Muhammed Mukta, who is live to us from Turkey. He's the professor of international affairs at Hamad Bin Khalifa University. Prof, thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I want us to start with just how the region is responding so far to this attack by the U.S. on Iran's nuclear facilities.
In general, the region is living in fear today because of the reaction or potential reaction from all parties, especially in the Gulf region. People are really scared of what will happen and what kind of move that the Iranians and the Israelis might do, or even the Americans in the coming hours and days.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at this attack so far, do you think that it's been a success? And I'm not just talking about in as far as the attack and the damage on the nuclear infrastructure is concerned, but I'm talking diplomatically here as well, because America says the diplomatic channels must now be open. But does this attack send Iran to the negotiating table in your view, or it sends them away from the negotiating table?
Well, it's a very complex situation. The Iranians don't want to go all the way because they might lose everything, especially after the Americans get involved. At the same time, they don't want to give up their nuclear program. Of course, these attacks actually convince them that having nuclear weapons makes sense strategically for them. And that's the only deterrent that they are thinking about now. But at the moment, on the short term, I think they prefer the war to stop and to get the opportunity to build their nuclear program again slowly. Nobody is benefiting. Yes, nobody succeeded so far. Actually, yes, the American damaged the program, the Iranian nuclear program, but they didn't get to the heart of it. The Israelis were also able to kill some of the important Iranian leaders, but they didn't break the back of the Iranian regime. At the same time, Iran proved very resilient and able to create a lot of damage for the Israelis, especially the psychological damage that might affect the Israelis and push part of their population to migrate.
And what about pushing that same population to respond aggressively towards the regime in Iran? Do you think this action by the U.S. somehow consolidates the support against the Iranian regime, or do you think that in fact it galvanizes support for the Iranian regime? Because the U.S. says, regime change is not really our focus here. I've heard interviews that the Israeli president and I think the prime minister have said, they've also said, we're not really pushing for regime change here. Yes, we think regime change would be a good outcome, but that's not our goal. How do you assess it?
What the Israelis and the Americans wish for is that the regime in Iran will collapse, not a regime change, but a regime collapse. But that's not realistic at this moment. A regime change in the way they've done in Iraq before, it's impossible in Iran. Iran is a huge country, and Americans, of course, cannot send soldiers on the ground. It's very complicated. So they wish for the regime collapse, but I think that's very far. That's really not realistic. The regime in Iran is very strong, and it will continue. The whole issue now is about the nuclear program, and if this war will continue for a while or hopefully will be stopped shortly.
Why? Because some of the listeners on my show this morning were asking, why is Iran not allowed to have nukes? Like, because there are other countries that have nukes. Do you have an answer to that? Why is America and Israel and other countries, for that matter, against Iran having nukes?
Well, that's the traditional Western double standard. It's not new. And the nuclear issue is just another example. Israel has nuclear weapons since the mid-60s. And based on what the experts saying, the Israelis have at least 90 nuclear warheads. None of the other Middle Eastern countries are allowed to have it. But I think this war, if it will lead to anything, it will lead to conviction of all the key countries in the region that they have to have nuclear deterrence. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to see in the coming years race towards nuclear weapons, not only in Iran, but probably in Turkey and other countries.
Mm-hmm. But then what do you say to this perspective that, well, nuclear weapons would be dangerous under Iran's hands, because these are people who, some of their leaders have consistently chanted death to America, death to Israel. They've had issues with the very existence of Israel as a state. So Israel and the US say, well, nuclear in the hands of a regime that has consistently threatened us is a threat to us.
Well, there is always a gap between rhetoric and reality. The Iranian regime is not suicidal. I think it's very rational. Of course, it has some slogans for local consumption and for all kind of political games. But they are rational. Nobody will use nuclear weapons anyway. Nuclear weapons are not for use. They are not for war. They are for peace. They are for deterrence. They are for balance of power. And I think what we're having in the Middle East is a vacuum of power. It's a huge imbalance of power that is creating all of these wars. Had Iraq, for example, had nuclear weapons, of course, we won't have the American invasion of Iraq, and we will have less wars. And same thing, if Iran had a nuclear weapon today, I think if Iran has a nuclear weapon, it will be much more rational and much more peace, like the peace that we had during the Cold War between the Americans and the Soviets. Probably there is some kind of that peace that will save the Middle East in the future. Unfortunately, if we look at the nuclear weapons as a savior, but unfortunately, that's the case if this kind of wars continue in the region.
Just lastly, what do you think is the best way for Iran to respond? America says if you dare retaliate, you are going to regret it. I mean, of course, there are some U.S. bases in the Middle East, and there are some militia that sort of support the Iranian regime that could be used to go on attack. What do you think is the best way to respond? And should they retaliate against America? Do they retaliate against Israel? Because they're saying we have a right to defend ourselves.
I think what the Iranians think about today is more strategic shift more than retaliation. Their best interest, I believe, is to keep the fight between them and the Israelis. Of course, any kind of attack against American bases or American interests will be harmful for Iran, and actually will be harmful for all, because even the Arab countries of the Gulf also will suffer from that. The American interest, the Chinese interest, everybody's interest. So the best interest for Iran is to keep the fight between them and the Israelis. They can do that for a while. They prove to have very effective missiles that are very damaging for the Israelis. But I don't think the war can continue for long without getting out of control. And what is needed is just to address the deep-rooted problems in the region that cause all of these. And first of all, the Palestinian problem there is a need for more wisdom and humanity in dealing with the issue, the way South Africa has dealt with. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of wisdom, enough for that wisdom in the region so far.
All right. Muhammad Mukhta, that's Professor Muhammad Mukhta, who is live to us from this region that is now gripped by anxiety and fear, as he says. He's a professor of international affairs at Hamad Bin Khalifa University. And I just thought we should speak to someone who's in the region, who can give us a sense of what the feeling is like in the region. I mean, I saw there were a number of countries that condemned the attack. I mean, Saudi Arabia was urging all parties to exercise restraint. Qatar was warning of catastrophic consequences as well. But other countries have responded, raising concerns about what this means for the region. It's 23 now, after 10.
You're with Clement Manyathela.
702. Let's walk the talk.
Let's take you to Israel now. Tovah Lazaroff is a veteran Israeli journalist who's joining us on the line. Tova, thank you so much for making time. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
What's the situation like in Israel now? There were some strikes yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday morning following the U.S. attacks. Is there work going on? Are the schools open at this point? What's the situation like?
No, well, right now, people are being told to really stay home because Israel has a very good warning system. It lets everybody know maybe, like 15 or 20 minutes before the missile is going to come so that you know to get close to a safe space. And the idea is that if you can enter a safe space, and that falls into three categories. One would be a stairwell of an apartment building. Also, quite a number of buildings and apartments in Israel have safe rooms. And those are rooms that are designed to withstand a missile attack. Other buildings, like mine, have a bomb shelter in the basement. And then there's a lot of communal shelters. Schools also have shelters.
Yeah.
Public buildings have shelters. Parking lots are really shelters. Any place that's really fortified. And what Israel is discovering is that as long as people can get to that safe space, they're going to survive a missile attack. So you can see these terrible, pictures of buildings completely bombed out. And yet you'll see a very low injury count relative to the amount of damage. And that's because Israel's a good warning system and people are really listening and going into shelters. But part of that is to just keep people off the streets. They're telling everybody stay home, only go out if you really need to. Schools are closed. You can't have, large public gatherings. And, supermarkets are open. Some restaurants or coffee shops are open.
Okay.
Some of them are saying, well, we're only open for takeout. Others, are open, but not that many people are there. So it's, there's very little traffic.
Gotcha.
You're now learning how small a country Israel is because you can drive very quickly from one space to another. But most people are really what they call sheltering in place, so to speak.
Okay.
And trying to out.
Yeah, from what you've heard from the government so far, what is the Prime Minister's plan in the administration there? Is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, happy about this U.S. intervention? In other words, does his administration still have goals in Iran, or are they happy that the U.S. has intervened and now this sort of settles it?
Well, the going theory had been, that Israel had the capacity to damage Iran's nuclear program, but not the military strength to take it out because you needed a certain kind of a bomb, which the U.S. possesses. So that the idea would be that the U.S. really, in singular strikes, could take out the three known nuclear facilities in Iran, and that's really what happened the other night, We weren't sure if the United States was going to come in or not, and what they did is they did very targeted strikes against three nuclear facilities, and the hope would have been that would take out Iran's nuclear program. But now what they're seeing is that there's a lot of question, and people don't know how much damage did they really do, and how much in advance of that attack, thinking that the United States might do it, there's a lot of thought that Iran moved, its uranium stockpiles or critical components of its program actually out of those facilities, thereby minimizing the damage. So then the question really becomes, what is left of Iran's nuclear program? What do you do about it? But there's a lot of theory that maybe it has not been eliminated. But Israel's goal here, aside from, eliminating or severely setting back Iran's nuclear program, is also, of course, to take out as much of its conventional missile program, et cetera, as it can, to really minimize the damage that Iran can cause Israel.
What reasons has the Israeli government given for opposing Iran to have to continue with enrichment when in fact Israel itself is allowed to do that? How have they explained that?
Well, Israel, there's nine countries, right, that are believed to possess nuclear weapons, and Israel is believed to possess nuclear weapons, but it itself has never claimed that it does, right? In fact, it has never stated that it is a nuclear weapon state. So that's the first part. If you don't say you have nuclear weapons, then that question becomes not relevant, right? But I think specifically in this case, Iran has threatened to annihilate Israel, and so the idea that it would have the nuclear weapons, that would also make it very possible for Iran to do that. The more, the better its missile program, the better weaponry it has, then the larger the threat. I mean, Israel and Iran have been at war for a while, right? This is just a direct part of that war. But Iran has really been waging a proxy war against Israel and a terror-related war, and it has been supporting and inflaming, regional conflicts to help use those militia groups, say Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas in Gaza, to attack Israel. So essentially, if you want to get at the core, if you're Israel, if you want to get at the core of the October 7th attack, right, that could not have happened without Iranian-backed funding. So the October 7th attack is really seen as an attack by Iran on Israel. The Hezbollah jumping in on October 8th is also seen as an Iran attack on Israel, the Houthis in Yemen. In other words, Israel is at war with Iran, and an opening happened with the ability to to weaken Hezbollah dramatically, and with the fall of Assad, an opening occurred for Israel to go after Iran's nuclear program and hopefully prevent it from going nuclear in the near future by way of eliminating what it sees as an existential threat against the country.
Yeah, Tova, just lastly, has Israel ever allowed the International Atomic Energy Agency to come in and make inspections? Because I have seen many interviews that Benjamin Netanyahu has done where he doesn't deny that there are no nuclear weapons in Israel. It feels like he just says he just won't confirm or deny it. So it looks like Israel has taken a policy.
That's what I'm saying. Israel has never claimed to have them. You won't find an Israeli official that says we have a nuclear weapons program, right? You won't find it. They haven't said it. Right, and thus there is no IEA inspections, but
But why can't they allow the IEA to come and inspect so that there's then a determination, then it's clear, it can be official?
I think for that, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think they don't operate from the framework that they have a nuclear weapons program. So then there would be no reason for there to be IAEA inspections. But it's a good question. I'm just saying it hasn't. They don't see. I mean, if they did have them, right, then they would see them as defensive only, where they would see, you know, Iran going. I mean, the Islamic regime is one that came in, right, with threats against the United States and Israel. Like there wasn't that point where that wasn't there.
Okay, got it. Nova, I'm out of time, but I really appreciate you making time for us. Tova Lazaroff is live to us from Israel. She's a veteran Israeli journalist. Tova, that's the name. And that's the question, right? If really they've taken a position not to confirm or deny whether they've got the nuclear facilities, they're doing enrichment themselves, why are you not allowing the International Atomic Energy Agency to come in so that they can make an official declaration? It's 10:33.
Hanging out with Clement
On 702.
Let's walk the talk.